Welcome back to Brave Ideas, where we chat with the leaders in commercial real estate to answer all questions space as a service and help office real estate reposition to meet the evolving demand from the future of work. This podcast is for anyone involved in commercial real estate in any way. If you're an investor, fund manager, developer, landlord, operator, property manager, agent, or broker, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you prefer to watch the full episode and join our newsletter, head over to braveideas.media. Welcome to this special feature, Brave Ideas, where I'm joined by Ivan Guberkov, Chief Product Officer at Office R&D. Ivan has published some Brave Ideas exclusives on braveideas.media. Go check them out. Today, we're going to dive into those articles. Ivan shares practical tips for operators on building the right tech stack, adopting e-commerce mindsets, and preparing for the future of revenue management. In this episode, we're going to talk about open versus closed tech stacks, how to audit your systems, avoid lock-in contracts, and prioritize integrations that protect flexibility and ROI. Why the industry needs to sell like Airbnb, dynamic pricing, how to approach it without the AI hype, when it makes sense to start, and who in your team should own it. AI sales agents, the promise, pitfalls, and the baseline data you need before implementation. Automation for efficiency, freeing up your team from admin tasks so they can focus on hospitality and the member experience, with a shout out to Work Bar in Boston as we dive into that case study. Whether you run a growing co-working brand or a global flex portfolio, this episode we're going to dive into actionable strategies to future-proof your operations and keep your team focused on what matters most, your customers. And without further ado, let's head into the studio with Ivan. Welcome to Brave Ideas, Ivan.
Hello, Caleb. It's a pleasure being here, and I'm looking forward to an exciting conversation about the world of flex spaces.
Me too. I've been enjoying reading your articles on braveideas.media, and we'll talk about some of those topics in a moment. But first, I have to call it out. We're in the Brave Ideas virtual studio. I'm coming to you from London, and Ivan, you are in Sofia.
Correct, Sofia, Bulgaria, right now.
Sofia, Bulgaria. I have to give a shout out to my friend Borislava Svetkova. She is one of the OGs of the Flex world. We all know her.
Yeah, absolutely. We also know her. Sterling offices. Yeah, one of the leaders over here on the Flex and service office market in Bulgaria. So shout out.
Shout out to Bori. And you guys Sofia just hosted last year the Coworking Europe conference.
Correct. Yeah, this was a great honor, getting the kind of the European chapter over here in Sofia, having all of these operators kind of visit and having good time and meeting a lot of friends at this point, partners and customers. It's a really great experience. Hopefully we can kind of repeat it, maybe in an even more interesting destination, because Sofia is the capital, but you have some cool mountain resorts and ski resorts as well. So,
well, not to get into too much travel, but everybody knows that I love visiting these special cities around Europe. So I spent about 2 weeks in Bulgaria in those mountain towns. Went up to the Rila Monastery, was over in Leshtin as well, and then ventured over to Melnik for some great wines.
Oh, okay. So you got the grand tour over there, kind of on the southwestern side of Bulgaria. Good for you. Did you like the wine?
I did. I especially like the fact that I got a bottle for €3 in a cave.
Well, no more. Inflation kind of hit us as well. So now it's going to be close to 10.
Well, before people start thinking they're listening to a travel podcast, we should probably talk about some tech, right?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Okay. Look, in the articles, so just to set this up for everyone, Ivan's been writing some articles on Brave Ideas. You guys have probably seen those. We're going to dive into some of the topics of those features now. And the first topic I want to bring up from one of your articles is around the open versus closed stacks in the tech stack in our industry, and in the cost involved. So, and I want to sort of put on my hat as an operator for a moment. If I'm running sort of a few locations on a bundled platform, how would you come in and audit my tech stack in the first week to sort of understand the risks, the hidden cost, and then maybe prioritize the 2 or 3 integrations that I should be looking at?
Yeah, this is, I guess, the battle of philosophies that you have on the market, and probably in other markets as well. Do you go in one kind of closed off Garden of Eden where you have all the software in one place and one vendor, or do you kind of try to go best of breed? So I'm going to start with a caveat that apparently we kind of truly believe in the best of breed solutions. So I'm going to put it that through my lens. And going to your question specifically, I think the first thing we would like to audit and understand is what is your customer journey? Because different operators approach acquiring customers and managing the kind of existing members in different ways. But again, customer journey end to end. How you sell, how the payments happen, how the operations happen, how do you take care of the member experience. And I guess the next step would be to ask you more or less like three questions. So first of all, can you swap out like billing or CRM without having to re-platform everything? And do you actually control your data? Does your vendor, like, can you actually get any data out of this thing that you're in right now? And how long are you kind of locked into contracts? Because these are all aspects that would matter a lot to decide how to move forward. And what I would say is that usually these kind of bundled, I would say, ERP style platforms, they kind of try to lure you in with low cost upfront, then you get into a 3 to 5 year contract. And I guess for this space, because you kind of operate with real estate, when you come out from a, let's say, 10, 15, 20 year lease and you go back to looking at software, you kind of try to treat it the same way in terms of contract length, but don't do it. Like 3 years is a long time in tech. Things are changing a lot. I'm not even going to speak about 5 year contracts. So try to make sure that you start with 1 to 2 year contracts with your vendor, whatever that is. If it works out, if you're happy, if everything is fine, yeah, you can move forward. But don't lock yourself in long term too early, and try to make sure you ask those questions and evaluate kind of the customer journey. I guess just to add in terms of prioritization, because we're talking like, okay, if it's not bundled in and I evaluate all these kind of steps and I'm like, okay, what do I change? Where's the highest ROI? I would say it's probably going to be billing and payments. So think about like using a payment gateway like Stripe, accounting like QuickBooks or Zero, or maybe even Sage if you're kind of more enterprise. Cash flow is basically the heartbeat of your business, and that's where you can make the most optimization. Then CRM, especially if you go beyond like the small spaces with 100 members or whatever, optimizing on that, getting a professional CRM like HubSpot, I would say, because you can start fairly easily free and it scales well. And if you're more enterprise, apparently Salesforce, Dynamics, whatever you want to do, make sure you plug any kind of leaks in your funnel. And the third kind of category of solution when you talk about best of breed, I think is access systems, uh, and also Wi-Fi potentially. But making sure that this kind of directly impacts your member experience and you take care of it and you provide very kind of easy, frictionless access to your space. I think that's kind of important. But again, I would say, remember, you don't need best of breed everywhere. Um, you might be happy with a kind of general solution that is average in some parts of the customer journey. But where it matters in these parts, I think you should bet on best of breed and try to find the right solution for you.
So if I just recap that for a second, you're saying that you'd come in at first, in the first instance, to do an audit to say, what integrations do I already have, and then prioritizing to make sure that you can seamlessly integrate the accounting system, the CRM, and the access and Wi-Fi control.
Payments as well.
Okay.
That should be as frictionless as possible.
Okay, good. Yeah, I guess accounting and payments kind of go hand in hand, but they also can be separate systems,
Yeah.
which is another important thing to point out. You mentioned the length of the contract, and I want to pick up on that for a moment because I think, yeah, certainly in your shoes as the CPO for Office R&D, you probably love to get a 10 or 20-year contract that's, coterminous with somebody's lease, but you're advocating for short-term contracts. So I guess I understand from an operator's perspective, we'd love that flexibility. But once we are bought into a system, if it's working, we're not going to change. If it's not working, it's usually hard to change because it's such a heavy lift to transition to something else. I guess what's the deal there with the short term?
Look, this is my general philosophy. Yes, I'm the chief product officer at Office R&D, and I represent the company, but this company cares about its customers at the end of the day. And we feel like we have a good enough product so we don't have to resort to 5, 10, whatever years of contracts you want to go with. So I personally prefer options value. When I do business in my personal life, I would like to keep my options open and I would like to make sure that I make the best deal. So, what I'm trying to say over here is I just don't like the practice of trying to sell low and then go and hit customers with high prices towards the end of the contract when they're already locked in, when they're fully embedded and integrated, and especially if it's a bundled solution. This is basically your business. we're talking. Like, it's not swapping Stripe with another payment gateway or swapping one part of the engine with another and the whole engine is actually still working. We're talking about more or less an open heart surgery, and you're taking huge risk. And this risk, the vendors that provide these long-term contracts that bundle everything, they know about that. So they're going to try to lure you in with low prices initially and get you like implemented. And then if you have any kind of challenges, I mean, you might complain, and if it's important enough, they're going to listen to you, but essentially they don't have you don't have much of a leverage. You kind of gave the leverage out. So what I'm saying is, instead of trying to optimize for the kind of economy of the actual the economic kind of value of the contract that you sign initially, and you just look at the price tag, I'm saying, you know what, push for a 1 to 2 year contract, try it out, look how things work, keep the leverage on the vendor in this case, and if it works out, if you're happy, go on and renegotiate. There's not going to be a vendor on the world that you go in year after year one and you're like, I like everything. I want you to give me a better price in return. We're going to sign for another 3 years. There's no one that is going to tell you they won't do that. We are going to do that as well if you want to do it and if you feel confident in the solution. So you can still reap the rewards and get a better pricing. Just don't get blindsided by this kind of lower cost initially, because it's usually towards the end of the contract it kind of picks up, and ultimately you end up with the same total cost of ownership over those years. So that's what I'm trying to advise.
Okay, and you said the word bundled platform, and how is so? If you could put a definition behind that for maybe somebody just entering co-working and they don't have a lot of experience in looking at these technology platforms. So, what is the difference between a bundled platform and the opposite of a bundled platform?
Well, I can give you an example. You can just look at the number of integrations and that are being provided by the vendor, and also figure out if there's kind of an open API that people can use to build their own integrations, and understand when you get the sales pitch if the vendor that is providing you the solution has their own solution for every step of the way, like their own payment gateway, their own accounting solution, their own whatever billing or whatever else solution. If everything is covered by them, you're basically getting into these kind of all-in-one bundled solutions. If you take Office R&D as an example, we know our strong points. We know that the main core operations are kind of important. We want to take care of the e-commerce side of things with our Growth Hub, for example. We're going to offer you a reception app if you want to use that. All the invoicing can happen within Office R&D, bookings, and all that. But when it comes to like a CRM, we don't want to build a CRM. There's like plenty of them out there. We're going to integrate with them. When it comes to payments, for the time being, we're like, okay, Stripe is doing a great job. They're our partners. They cover all the risks. They're a professional kind of payment gateway. We're going to integrate with Stripe. So that's where you can see the differences.
Okay. It makes sense, and I understand now because knowing the different platforms out there, I completely see where some folks are delivering everything, and other folks are delivering one thing and integrating with a lot of different things. So it totally makes sense. Yvonne, thanks for diving deep on that one. I want to move to the next topic. One of the things that you've written about, and I wholeheartedly agree, is this whole concept around the Airbnbification of the user experience, the customer experience in digital formats. So, Airbnb came out, disrupted the hotel industry big time in the experience on the ground, but also in the digital experience, the app, the website, so clean, revolutionary at its time. And well, I think our industry hasn't been the best at that throughout history. It's getting better, of course. But you say that co-working industry needs to sell like Airbnb. The operator website, instead of having forms that people fill out and submit inquiries, it should be a smooth process for bookings and real-time availability and transparent pricing and instant checkouts. Music to my ears. Why do you think it's so important for us to sell like Airbnb?
Well, it's the customer and the customer behavior. At the end of the day, the whole real estate industry needs to understand that they cater to customers. And if before all the power was, I guess, in the real estate landlords and companies, I don't think this is the case anymore, especially after the COVID pandemic. So if you listen to the customer, if you look at yourself, your kids, your relatives, your friends, and how you consume physical real estate and experiences nowadays, you're going to immediately understand that we are living in an age where we're used and trained to get a cab by taking out our phone and kind of calling a Uber. You want a vacation rental? You go to Airbnb. You want a hotel, most of the time you go to the booking.com. Now most of the hotel chains, they have their own kind of e-commerce experience, but the expectation here is instant availability, instant confirmation. I don't have to deal with other people. I just want to get the job done, and that's it. So I think the customer is the main thing that drives this change.
So the topic that you're discussing here is not really new. Airbnb's been around a long time. Actually, had been on panels in our industry discussing this topic here and there. So why do you think it's taken so long for our industry to adopt this user experience?
Well, because this industry, I think it's mainly focused on two aspects. It's actually the real estate, the fit out, the physical part of the business, which is normal. This is the background of most of the people that kind of join the industry. And the second part is hospitality. And again, based on the background of most of the people that join it, this is the part they kind of focus their attention on. And very few of them actually focus on the brand as much, or focus on the kind of digital experience, how you enable customers. And software was always seen kind of as a byproduct, something that you kind of need, but it's optional, and you need to focus on the other things. And also, you're kind of pouring all of your money and time, usually in the fit outs and negotiating with the landlords and hiring your team and training them. And you have very little time for the technology part, especially if you don't understand it that well. So I think there was a general lack of understanding of the importance of technology, and probably the consumers weren't also pushing too much in that direction. So I think that's kind of the main reason things were a little bit left behind. But I also believe that now we're in a situation where flexibility is valued, it's demanded, and this flexibility and managing it cannot really be done efficiently with people.
I mentioned Airbnb disrupted the hotel industry, but one of the things that the hotel industry has been really good at for many years, following on the airline industry, is dynamic pricing, revenue management, yield management. Airbnb, when they first came out, they didn't have this functionality. So while they might have been disrupting the hotel industry, eventually they adopted the principles that the hotel industry was using to help their host make money, in different ways. And so that's now starting to become a topic in our industry, dynamic pricing. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts around dynamic pricing. When will we see complete adoption? Who's doing it right? What to look out for when you start to think about it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a buzzword, but I would like to reiterate on something. Dynamic pricing is something I would call in this situation champagne problem, more or less. This is for the operators or the brands that have already done kind of a great job in figuring out this kind of a digital experience for their customers and the checkout experience for them. So before we jump into dynamic pricing, I would say please make sure that before you start talking about dynamic pricing, you've figured some blockers like lack of live availability, lack of transparent pricing, lack of the option to check out on your websites and whatever digital kind of assets you have out there. Once you do that, let's talk about dynamic pricing. So just wanted to make a caveat before we jump into that. And dynamic pricing, I'm saying it's a buzzword because it somehow got mixed up with the whole AI buzz that we're hearing left and right. And we somehow ended in a situation where dynamic pricing gets kind of pushed as something that needs to be AI driven and all that. I'm going to start first by saying my personal advice, don't start with AI when you talk about dynamic pricing. Start with control. And dynamic pricing can be powerful, don't get me wrong, but trust is fragile, and outsourcing pricing to a black box before you know what works for your market might end up in a disaster that kind of totally turns you off this whole concept. If you ask me on how to start and how to use it, find solutions that provide it, find solutions that have it as part of your e-commerce package, and try to make sure that you start with simple things. Simple first, always. Like rules like weekday versus weekend pricing, peak versus off peak kind of pricing based on data like specific hours or specific days or during the holidays, kind of last second booking discounts, and just look at the data because you're going to have hypothesis what works, what doesn't, but the data that you see after you implement this kind of dynamic pricing is actually going to give you the answer to this question. And I guess once you get through this foundational step and you understand what works and you want to just yield a little bit more revenue and make some slightly different changes and you have enough confidence, you can think about the AI automation with some guardrails like price floors, price ceilings, and kind of clear communication that is given to the customers so you don't mislead them. So if I think if you're able to leverage it properly, you also have to be realistic about what you can expect. From what I have seen and talk with other customers, you can probably expect like 5 to 10% revenue uplift per booking. But expecting that you're suddenly going to make 100% or more, I think that might be a little bit more marketing, or this is kind of the outlier.
Can we tap into that for a moment? Because
Yeah.
I think everybody gets excited about dynamic pricing, and just for anybody that's listening that hasn't heard that term before, the dynamic pricing is basically matching the price to supply and demand. And that's the simple way to put it, but it can be more complex. Like Ivan was just talking about, having floor prices, having max prices, putting guardrails around that. But when you said it can increase the pricing by a certain percentage, whether it's automated or whether it's manual, how does that concept work?
Well, I'm gonna use Uber again. Like when there's a lot of demand and when that demand comes in, you have surge pricing on Uber. It's very, very similar to that one. So basically what dynamic pricing can do for you is in peak hours, you can decide to charge a little bit more. So you optimize
For
that.
like a meeting room or a day pass or
Yeah,
something, you mean?
yeah. Mainly that. I don't I don't think you can find a good way to use it for private offices or anything that is long term, because you haven't even put it on your website to begin with, and I don't think that people are going to react too well to that. So we're talking about short term bookings and rentals, event spaces, meeting rooms, like day passes or whatever you want to kind of sell out there. And one way is to kind of introduce some sort of a surge pricing. And the other aspect of it is just filling up empty spaces. It very much depends on seasonality. You have some kind of spaces that are very busy during kind of, I would say, spring and like autumn. Winter and summer are a little bit slower, so you want to attract more people versus your competition. You can lower a little bit the pricing. And yes, you're not going to have an uplift per booking that I just mentioned, but at least you're going to make money out of the space instead of keeping it empty. So
So it's
these are kind of
it's maximizing occupancy in the slow time, and it's maximizing price during the busy time, basically.
correct. Yeah, that to oversimplify it, that's about it.
Okay. And so you're saying that in order to do this, you have to have the initial foundation of your online availability, live availability. You have to have
Yeah.
it be able to be booked online and take payments versus, people just requesting, information about it. Otherwise, there's nothing dynamic about it. But then once you have that and you want to implement dynamic pricing, you're saying don't just jump into, AI and automation. Actually come in, maybe manually do it first, and then learn how it works for you before you start turning on some automation.
Yeah, if you want to be smart about it, and again, you can be, I would say, a little bit crazy and just jump in and say like I'm going to enable everything, and you're like, let's see what happens. I'm not that kind of person. I want to be prepared, so I wouldn't advise on that one. I would say take the data from whatever system you have right now that looks at your booking patterns, and understand, like, is there seasonality, is there specific days of the week, usually Monday and Friday, where things are slower, is there specific hours of the day where things are a little bit slower, is there specific holidays that might affect the occupancy that you have of your space. Take those things, take the data, and start off with some basic hypothesis. Let's say, for example, when we look at the data that we have for our customers, we see that usually Monday and Friday, especially between like 3 to 5 p.m., 5, 6 p.m., it's usually slower. When I say slower, I'm talking about room bookings. We have less room bookings in those kind of periods. Again, this is very aggregated data, so you might have specifics in different regions and different kind of types of spaces. So this is kind of a sure bet for you. You can say, you know what? Let's see what happens if I lower prices by X percent, let's say 10%, 20%, between 3 to 5 on Monday and Friday. Put it out there. Run it for 2 weeks. See what's the data. Is there an uplift? Is occupancy kind of increasing there? Good. Okay. This is a successful strategy. You can keep that live. Then look into holidays or look into the seasonality, like summer. Is it slower? Do you want to do kind of some sort of promotion throughout the whole summer? You can do that as well. And just test it out. If it works out, if you're seeing either more occupancy and as a result of that more revenue, good. If things are actually worse or the same, maybe they'll introduce that complexity, because not everything is going to work out, and there's like no golden rule that is going to work out for every operator.
So I'm going to bring back the hotel analogy again for a moment. I tend to do that across many of my podcast episodes, but I do think that the future of our industry looks like what the hotel industry has looked like for many years. In the hotel industry, hotel brands have revenue managers that specifically look at this data. And I'm curious, based on your clients across the world, what role within the co-working operation or head office. Is this a head office revenue management role? Is it an on-site community manager, general manager role? Who do you see facilitating this management of this dynamic pricing?
Oh, it very much depends on the size and scale of the customer we're talking about. This industry, the co-working flex industry, is probably 65% SMBs. By SMBs, I mean like one location operators that are around 150 desks to 200 employees, sorry, members kind of size. So for those people, for the majority of the industry, there's not going to be a head office that does that. It's going to be like the whatever founder, owner, whoever's kind of running the whole business that is going to set up those strategies and hopefully kind of make them work out. For the more scaled businesses where you have multiple locations, you have dedicated teams, the ones that are kind of in the mid market, I have seen this being either provided as a responsibility to the marketing team, or because the marketing team like website, they treat this as part of the website journey, so marketing team usually owns this. Alternatively, this is given to the sales team, although that's a strange dynamic because the sales team is a little bit kind of suspicious of the e-commerce. It's like, is this thing going to take our job now? So I haven't seen that many successful implementations of e-commerce the moment when you start kind of introducing the sales team, just because they see it as a threat. And in the very large organizations, you might have a very specific growth team. We have some customers that do have that. They have like chief growth officers or like commercial officers that have a specific person that takes care of optimizing the funnel. So when you start from advertising, collecting leads, making sure that those flow to the whole funnel until they actually sign, and their only job is to try to optimize it. But this is like usually very large operators that have like teams that can be dedicated to this.
Well, then one last question on this topic. Is there a scale of either location footprint or number of locations where dynamic pricing should start to kick in, or does it apply across all, but in different ways?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have a data backed answer, so I'm a little bit hesitant to provide kind of a strong opinion on this one. But I would say scale matters here because if we're talking, think about it, if we're talking about uplift of 5 to 10% or increasing occupancy with, let's say, 10 to 20%, I mean, if you have two rooms, it's going to be a few $100 every month. It doesn't make much sense. So I would say it starts making a difference when you have like 3 to 5 locations or more. You have around, let's say, 50 to 100 rooms. And at that point, the scale is enough that these kind of marginal improvements here and there, and again, there can be better improvements. I'm just saying, let's not overestimate what this thing can do. It's not like a silver bullet. So these marginal improvements at that scale, at 3 to 5 locations and 50 plus meeting rooms, whatever, like something like that, would start having a difference for your business.
Yeah, no, I can see a solo operator setting up their first one with maybe one part-time employee. It'd be quite difficult to think about looking at booking trends and thinking about how to change it. You probably know it in your head. You don't need to follow a report, but does it make sense? Is there going to be enough uplift in rent and revenue to actually put in some sort of system to do it? Probably, maybe not. Depends on the size of your one location, I guess. But as you start growing and getting more locations, then maybe it does make sense. And then, as you say, scale. If you increase revenue by 10% on one unit, it's a small incremental increase. But if you do it across 100 units, then what makes a big difference to the bottom line? Well, I want to stay on sort of this direction a little bit, but slightly pivot. There's a lot of AI tools out there. So we're talking about, AI and dynamic pricing, but there's also AI in the whole sales process, the sales funnel. This is primarily back to the offices though, probably. And in some of your articles, you talk about when, where, how, what to think about when you're integrating these AI sales agents, so to speak. How do you get ROI on them, and in what to do, what not to do. So I guess, is there a baseline, like with the dynamic pricing? Is there a place you need to start first, and then what's the best practice to implement and what to look out for?
So I would say first, be careful. Like, don't get on that hype train. I don't think this is necessarily a disclaimer I need to make to this industry because everyone is careful with new technology and they want to make sure they kind of invest where it actually matters. You can definitely use like ChatGPT and the general like large language models to help your daily work. That's fine. If we talk about specific kind of industry specific solutions and how you can leverage them, you're right. One of the places where we have seen some success by I mean, as an industry, are the AI sales agents. And there is kind of the fastest ROI there, I think, and the most measurable impact, because you basically pay some sort of amount for that agent and it brings you more sales or it doesn't, and it's pretty clear if it's worth paying for it. You asked me specifically about the baseline where we start off. Look, if you think about your digital presence and what this AI agent is going to do, it's going to improve two things. In theory, it should increase your inquiry to tour conversion rate. So it's all about conversion rates. Again, I just assume that you're going to have some sort of form on your website, and we're talking about private offices predominantly, or event spaces where you need to usually talk with a person, and that your next step is a tour. Again, you can oversimplify here and directly put them in the e-commerce, but that's not our conversation. So first thing, baseline, conversion rate from inquiry to tour, and then the average response time to leads. I remember back in the day when I was kind of leading also sales teams, there was this kind of rule that I think if you respond to a lead within the first, what was it, like 5 to 10 minutes, your chance of actually converting that lead to a successful sale like increases by almost 80% or something. I might be missing the specific numbers, but it was like a huge difference. And I remember at that point, it would like all the B2B softwares had like these kind of forms and people forgot to respond to them, or there was a day lag or whatever. Then came like the instant scheduling of demos and all that, and that changed everything. So I think that's the second point where you get better response time, and as a result of that, you become more competitive. Because if you're offering similar products in a similar location, I think at the end of the day, the person that usually wins, if you have a good sales team, is the one that responds first to the lead and captures their attention and engages them.
Yeah, it's important. Reminds me of way back in the day, in the ancient days of my IWG career. Before it was IWG, at Regis in Washington D.C., we had a corporate account in Dallas that anytime someone inquired through the website, either for our location or the main landing page of the website, it went to the corporate office first, to this corporate sales team. They spoke. They had an agent. They probably had a room full of agents. These are human intelligence, not artificial. And they would qualify the customer. And then we had a CRM called Pivotal back in the day that they would stick it in for the on-site salesperson, the general manager of the location, to be able to then connect with that customer and arrange the tour. And sometimes they would arrange the tour for you. It's fantastic. So the key there, the reason they implemented that corporate sales team is because on the on-site teams, an inquiry comes in, you might be working with a customer on site. So how do you respond in 7 to 10 minutes? You can't. So they had it through the corporate sales team. But I guess if you are that small operation, you can't have a corporate sales team. The artificial intelligence, a sales agent that would be able to interact with that customer instantly in a human-like way, I can see the benefit. But I guess my question or cynicism, and I'm a big advocate for AI, but my cynicism is, this isn't me saying it doesn't work, but I just want to get your thoughts on this, is like, how do you ensure that it doesn't sound like AI? I mean, I know you train it, of course, but I put out a post on LinkedIn recently. I see a lot of people posting these contrasting statements. This isn't just X, it's Y. You can tell right away on LinkedIn, this is AI written. How do you make sure the sales conversation isn't AI feeling?
The reality is that there is like just a lot of guidance that you have to provide to the AI to make sure that it is spot on. Like every AI agent out there has like tone of voice and like some specific rules that you want to provide when it starts and what kind of data you feed it in. But the reality is that in our case, for example, we have a dedicated person, and I'm not like joking, that specifically works on our AI agent. For the help desk, and provides consistent guidance based on data, looking at cases that haven't been resolved well to improve it on a daily basis. I'm going to disappoint everyone probably and say that it actually still requires a person if you want to make it as effective as possible. If you're fine with the more generic approach and you're okay with the utilitarian kind of point of view where it's like, well, at the end of the day, all this thing about brand and how do you want to sound about it, like the person just wants to know how much does this private office cost, and do you have the private office that I need, and who can I talk with, or like when can I schedule a visit for the office that I like. If you're fine with that, you don't really need a person to overlook it. If you want really this kind of specific, brand specific responses and you want to replicate your best sales rep, you're going to have to give it a lot of guidance and inputs and so on and so forth, and do constant corrections until I think it gets to a point where it's satisfactory. So
Okay.
that's it.
So I want to scenario play with you on this for this last
Yeah.
piece of this topic. I'm an operator. I want to lean into the AI sales agents. If I come to you and say, I need to choose one initiative next quarter because I don't have a huge team, what do I need to pick to deploy this and then measure the success of it?
Well, first of all, you'll have to provide it with the guidance. So you need to have some sort of data information on how do you want it to talk, what is like the typical procedures that you have. So you need to feed it with some relevant data. And each provider out there on the market has different ways to ingest that information. If you have a wiki with your main procedures and what you follow, it can do that. If you have any kind of a guidance documents that you can provide it, it can use that. But anyways, you need to have some sort of a summary of how does your sales process look like, so this thing can try to replicate it. So that's the first thing. The second part would be to make sure you're kind of testing it out thoroughly before you put it on live, because you want to make sure that it provides the right information about the availability and the right offices, and you take out the inventory that you don't want it to touch. So definitely test it out. Probably give it like, I don't know, 2 to 3 weeks before you put it in front of customers. And then when you look at results and measuring results, I would start first with like your conversion rates. Start with a baseline. You need to know what is your current conversion, like how many people land on your website. Out of those people, how many go to your forum, and out of those people, how many actually kind of click to get kind of a visit, and then how many of those actually end up in doing a tour or ultimately getting a sale. So if you don't have any idea about your funnel, I think it's going to be very hard for you to understand if this thing is actually helping you or not. So get your baseline in place, get your sales process documented, and test it out. And then I would say look for 20 to 25% uplift in conversions. That's what I think you should be looking at. I mean 20 to 25%, not in absolute terms. I mean like 20 to 25% over your current conversion rate.
Okay.
And if it surpasses it, awesome. Like that's great. If it doesn't, well, then there's a problem.
That's good advice. Thank you. Thank you for going deep on that. We talk about artificial intelligence helping make things more efficient, automating processes, taking the human labor out of it, saving cost. But there's another way to save cost, and that's by automating the different integrations that are happening. I'm taking manual processes and turn them into auto. It's not AI, but it's just automation. You had a good example. Give a shout out to Sarah Travers over at WorkBar over in Boston.
Yeah.
You had a great example of how their team implemented these automated integrations and saved a ton of time. And I'd like you to just share a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, making money is always more sexy in terms of software, kind of getting you to make more money, and that's why we got into AI and all those things. But I would say efficiency is also important. Automations are still kind of ruling the world. This is where we're at right now. So I just want to be very clear when we talk about automation and efficiency. What do I think the ultimate benefit is in that? So for me, efficiency doesn't mean saving costs like letting people go or like, I don't know, reducing costs everywhere. It's more about making sure that your team is focused on high impact work that only people can do. For me personally, the big differentiator for flexible and co-working spaces is the hospitality component as well. So you get a great serviced office and a great vibe. It's not just a bunch of glasses and windows and bricks everywhere. You want to free up enough time for your team to kind of talk, work with your members and figure out the best way to attract customers. You don't want them to spend time doing sheets and sending reports and all that admin work that usually happens in a space. With that kind of disclaimer, when we talk about efficiency, what I understand, I can share a little bit more about the WorkBar. And I think, again, Sarah Travers, the CEO of WorkBar, kind of summed it up. They basically said they wouldn't be able to do their business without kind of the improvements that they did with Office R&D. The main thing for them was using Office R&D and Stripe before they kind of run custom stack. They did like a homegrown solution, which is fairly popular with larger operators that still do believe that their bread and butter is also technology. I disagree with that. It rarely works out. Even in some of the kind of large, huge behemoths that we have, I think it ended up badly for them where they think that they're going to do their whole technology stack. And as a result of this kind of custom stack, their payments were complex, costly, risky, like refunds, syncing invoices, overdue payments, all the failed payments and all of that. So they basically decided to automate the billing with Officer R&D, with the automated bill runs. They reduced their costs because they're a US operator for the international kind of audience. And they moved from only accepting cards to ACH, which is kind of like SEPA payments or BACS payments in the UK. And they cut their processing costs significantly because on card payments, you pay like usually 2.5, 2.9% plus 30 cents. On ACH, I think it's like a buck or buck 50, whatever, per transaction flat most of the time. And they had real-time data that give them better cash flow visibility, automated overdue reminders, and you could do refunds directly in the software solution, so you didn't have to rely on accounting or a separate team. And it freed a lot of time from billing admin stuff, especially for community managers, to actually focusing on working with members and their problems. That's the whole point I want to drive. ROI, in terms of financial ROI that you can put on a spreadsheet and calculate, this isn't the only efficiency. It's cash flow, it's cost saving, yes, but also like member trust and being allowing your team to work with your members, increasing trust, increasing brand loyalty, and ultimately retention. These are the things that you also gain, and they're usually a little bit hidden in this kind of equation.
Well, some of the biggest impacts to the bottom line is retention. If you retain a client, you don't have to go through the cost of acquiring a new one. And I think the automation that enables you to save money on transaction costs is important. But to me, what you described is superpowers. The technology there gives the team superpowers to be able to do the human work that we need to do with our community.
Correct. Yes.
Yvonne, this is great. We went deep. We got aspirational, talked big picture, but we got into the weeds as well. I would expect nothing less from a chief product officer. So thank you for sharing all your wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for everything you're doing for the industry. I think we need so many future thinkers sharing their brave ideas, if I can be cliche.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate all your insights in these articles and on this podcast. And looking forward to seeing all the success you have.
Yeah, Caleb, thank you very much for inviting us, Officer Andy and me personally. I really love what you're doing for the industry. I'll keep on going over here. I appreciate the time that we talk together, and I hope if Bori doesn't send you an invite, you have an invite from me. Come and visit us to Bulgaria. We're gonna have some good time. Again, thank you very much for the invite.
I look forward to having a Shropshire salad, if I can say that correctly. The best tomatoes in the world. Yeah, amazing. Well, Ivan Blogodaria, if I can say that correctly. And thank you very much. Until next time, take care of yourself. If you've enjoyed this episode, you'll enjoy our Brave Ideas newsletter. Subscribe today by tapping on the link in the show notes. And don't forget, I'm always on the lookout for buildings to acquire and reposition with brand-led hospitality. If you know a building I should look at or an owner looking to sell or partner with, drop me a DM or contact us at bravecorp.co. Until next time, take care of yourself.